I've read a ton of the best personal finance books out there, and they all say basically the same thing. Spend less than you earn, set a budget, invest your money for the long term, and when you retire, you should have a nice, comfortable retirement, which is great and has served me well. But recently I've been trying to get new ideas and escaping this bubble of all the books I read saying the same thing by reading books that I hate. And today I'm going to tell you about a book that I hated reading, but I think everybody that's interested in starting a side hustle or setting up their own business or just improving their finances in general should consider reading. And that book is The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco. Now, just the title alone is pure clickbait. I mean, The Millionaire Fastlane. And to be honest, the writing style is very abrasive and disparaging to anyone who isn't interested in making tons of money. And just a few examples from the book is a quote directly from the book: "The leading cause of poorness is poor choices." Ugh, I mean, I told you it was abrasive. The other thing is insight into the author's mindset. Each chapter starts with a quote from a legendary personality like Albert Einstein, except 3 of the chapters where the author chooses to insert his own quote at the start of the chapter rather than one from Einstein. So you get an idea of it. And the book launches straight in to talking about what the author defines as success, which is having a massive house and, as far as I can tell, lots of Lamborghinis. And that's fine if that's your measure of success. It's not my measure of success, but I carried on reading because in this book there is some absolutely brilliant lessons for any aspiring entrepreneurs, and I'm going to break those lessons down for you today so that you don't have to read the book, although to be honest you probably ought to. So the first concept in the book is what the author describes as the slow lane versus the fast lane to wealth. Okay, so the first part is what he calls sidewalkers, and sidewalkers he defines as people that are never gonna generate significant wealth, and he doesn't really say much about them other than making extremely disparaging comments like the one that I mentioned. The next path to wealth is what he calls the slow lane to wealth, and this he defines as people that are building their wealth slowly using all of the techniques that I mentioned in the books. So spending less than you earn, saving your income, investing it wisely, and building wealth for the long term. And he's pretty scathing about this strategy and points out some reasonable flaws with it, that you could get ill, your time is tied to your job, and even if you're a doctor and you have a high-paying job, you could get ill and then everything could come tumbling down in the slow lane to wealth. So what he goes on to define is his preferred method, which is the fast lane to wealth, which basically involves building scalable businesses as an entrepreneur and using leverage to generate excessive wealth. And whatever your thoughts about that, I think it has some merit, because if you just replace the title of The Millionaire Fastlane with instead the faster and easier route to financial independence, so that you no longer have your income tied to working hours and hours in your job, then it starts to sound a bit more appealing, and that's certainly something that I've found, but it's probably not much of a clickbait title. So that's the first concept in the book, that there's a slow lane to wealth, but there's also this fast lane, and then the rest of the book just gets into telling you how you can achieve this fast lane. And this, I think, where the book is pretty strong. So the first part of how MJ DeMarco tells us to achieve this fast lane is what he calls the wealth equation. And the wealth equation is incredibly simple. It's just your wealth equals the net profit times the scalability divided by time. Now, there is a lot of jargon in there, and I think it's worth breaking that equation down because it really sounds really simple, but actually it is the key to building a sustainable side hustle, in my opinion. So let's drill it down. So net profit, as you probably know, is the profit after costs have taken out, okay? So I think it's important to distinguish net profit, which is your profit after you've taken away all your costs, so a realistic indicator of profit, from turnover, okay? So turnover is vanity, but profit is sanity, okay? And what MJ DeMarco is saying is basically, if you can make more profit, not turnover, okay, because turnover is just vanity, make more profit, then you're gonna build wealth faster. It sounds pretty straightforward, but the rest of the book does sort of get into how you might achieve that. And I think it's a pretty key thing for you to understand. If you have a business that's turning over £1 million, a £1 million turnover sounds amazing, okay? But if your net profit margin is only 5%, then a business that's just turning over £100,000, so 10 times less than the business turning over £1 million, but with a 90% profit margin, is going to make nearly double the profit. So a business with £100,000 turnover but 90% margin will make almost double the profit, the net profit of a business turning over 1 million but with a 5% margin. So profit margin, incredibly important. The other part of the wealth equation that MJ DeMarco mentioned is scalability. He's just using scalability interchangeably with leverage. Leverage is such an important concept if you are thinking about starting a side hustle, okay? So leverage is just a force multiplier, basically. And I think a really good description of leverage, what leverage is, it comes from Naval Ravikant, who's an extremely successful entrepreneur and investor. And he summarizes leverage into 4 possible categories of leverage, okay? So the first leverage is what he calls financial leverage. So this would be like using debt or someone else's money to amplify your own personal wealth building potential, okay? So one example of financial leverage would be real estate, okay? Generally, if you buy a property, it might be that you have a mortgage on it and you're using financial leverage to amplify your returns, okay? So that's financial leverage. Second type of leverage that Naval defines is labor. Pretty simple. You just develop systems and leveraging the time of other people to build out your own worth. So by building teams, hiring talented people, delegating tasks, you can multiply your own productivity and your impact. So that's labor leverage. Third type of leverage that Naval defines is product leverage. And that basically means creating or owning products that can reach a vast audience with minimal incremental cost or effort. So going back to what MJ DeMarco is saying, which is products, but with a high profit margin. So Naval and MJ DeMarco emphasize that software, books, or digital content that can be distributed widely and provide value to a large number of people, but with tiny marginal costs to produce, that can give you massive profits and use leverage really nicely. And the fourth type of leverage is media, which media leverage is pretty relevant in today's digital age. So you can use the media to amplify your message and your reach. And by leveraging social platforms such as YouTube or podcasts or other forms of media, you can share your ideas, build a personal brand, connect with a massive audience of people, and you can use that media leverage to amplify the effect that you have, okay? So I think leverage is something that you really need to think about if you're going to start a side hustle, unless you want to just work more and more hours, because leverage is a way that you can uncouple your time from your earnings. And let me drill into that a little bit more. So as a doctor, if you go to work and do 1 hour's work, you receive 1 hour's pay. Okay, brilliant. But if you could leverage your time as a doctor, you could do 1 hour's work and get 10 hours pay. And you're thinking, sounds like a scam. Let me give you an example. So let's just say you're a doctor and you see a need for a medical device, a new piece of equipment. You design this equipment, you spend 1 hour designing it, and then you license it to someone who sells it and distributes it for you. Every time someone uses that piece of equipment, or every time you sell that piece of equipment, you are getting paid. And yet at the start of it, you just spent 1 hour of your time developing it. You've uncoupled your time from your earnings power, and you're losing leverage to amplify your potential. And I think there's a few examples around at the moment of people that are using leverage, specifically doctors who are using leverage to grow out a reasonable sized business. So I don't have any affiliations with any of these people, but Louise Newsom is a menopause doctor, and she successfully built up a massive clinic around her own personal brand. So she's leveraging labor there. She's got other people that works for her, and they are building her business for her. So she's an example of doing that. Dr. Karan is another example of a doctor using leverage. So he's got a large YouTube channel, just started a podcast, which is how I discovered his content. So he's using leverage to amplify his own personal brand. And of course, we couldn't really be on YouTube without talking about the ultimate doctor turned YouTuber, Dr. Ali Abdal, who has massively used leverage of YouTube, so social leverage in the examples that we gave, to earn considerably more than he would ever earn as a doctor and amplify his own brand that way. Back to the book, MJ DeMarco goes on to tell us about specific examples, and he uses the example of money doesn't grow on trees, and then proceeds to say how you can grow your own money tree, which is a kind of analogy for saying if you build a business which is independent of your time and is working 24 hours a day without you needing to be there, then you have grown your own money tree. So he gives examples of a rental system, for example, real estate, property, people are paying you to rent your asset off of you. He uses SaaS or computer products. So SaaS, is software as a service for those of you not familiar. He uses our example of content, YouTube. Also uses the example of distribution, okay? So you could use Amazon to distribute your own ebook or a product that you drop ship if that's what you're into. Personally, I think drop shipping sounds like a nightmare, but some people love it. And the final thing he goes on to mention is that you can leverage HR. So that's what he's breaking it down to. And throughout the book, MJ DeMarco is constantly stressing the importance of entrepreneurship, and he advocates for entrepreneurship as a means to wealth. He encourages the readers, us, to shift our mindset from being employees and consumers to becoming producers or business owners. And I think this is massive, really. I think the really nice part of the book is where he says that employees are on a linear scale, and that goes back to what I just said. You put in 1 hour of time and you get 1 hour of money, okay? And entrepreneurs could go on an exponential scale. You put in 1 hour to design your medical device, you sell it 1 million times, and you're just hitting the exponential part of that curve. So you're thinking, okay, this sounds good, but where do I start? Like, how can I even think about starting a business? Well, the final part of the book is for you then, really, because he goes through what he calls the 5 commandments of control. And these are criteria that your hypothetical business idea needs to satisfy in order to become successful. So if you're struggling to get an idea and you're thinking, oh, what should my idea? Is my idea any good? I think this can help you a lot. So the first commandment is of control. So he just emphasizes that if you start a business, you're taking control of your destiny. You're shifting from becoming an employee to an entrepreneur. And he shares his own story of starting and scaling a limousine dispatch business, which allowed him to break free from the constraints of traditional employment and gain control of his income and time. The second commandment is of entry. So where he's highlighting here is the significance of finding a market entry point with high demand and limited competition. And he discusses the concept of need, which is basically a business that's fulfilling an essential need rather than a discretionary wants. And he gives examples of entrepreneurs who identified untapped niches and created successful businesses. I've heard Rob Walling's example of saying the same thing here, and maybe it's a bit better and more applicable to our audience, because Rob Walling breaks it down by having an aspirin business or a vitamin business. And an aspirin business fulfills a need. You've got a headache, you need an aspirin. Whereas a vitamin business is a nice to have. You don't need, strictly speaking, not medical advice, a vitamin, but you need, it could help your health to improve in certain situations. So an aspirin business service wants, a vitamin business services unyet known needs. So hopefully that just sort of breaks that down a bit. The other thing in his 5 commandments is time. So basically, he challenges the conventional belief here in the deferred life plan, where people trade their time for the promise of future retirement. And he encourages us, the reader, to prioritize their time and avoid getting trapped in the slow lane of work before, decades elapse and you get to enjoy life when you retire. Although I quite enjoy life before retirement, but maybe that's just me. And the final thing is the commandment of need. So you basically need to understand the needs of your target market. And by identifying specific needs and developing innovative solutions, entrepreneurs can create businesses that can generate significant wealth. So all in all, I did hate reading this book. I just find the style really abrasive. It makes me uncomfortable with quotes like, the leading choice of poorness is poor choices. I just think that does himself a disservice. To be fair to him, in chapter 6, he does go a bit more in detail about what having extra wealth can mean. And it isn't just Lamborghinis. It's about getting back control of your time, working on your own terms. And if you're working 100-hour weeks and still not making ends meet, then you've got to be seriously thinking about that. So in summary, I wouldn't read this book unless you've read the 3 previous books that I mentioned in our book reviews. That was The Millionaire Next Door, The Psychology of Money, and Smarter Investing. because I think they're going to give you much, much more than this book is. But if you're stuck in that bubble that I mentioned, then I think The Millionaire Fast Lane is worth a go. But before you read The Millionaire Fast Lane, I would highly recommend you to read The Unfair Advantage by Ash Ali and Hassan Kuba. And they came on our podcast, and you can see that video in YouTube, because I just think that's a much better book on getting a handle on what's really important, which is your unfair advantage. So hopefully that helped you. As I said, we're new to YouTube, and every time I ask for your feedback in the comments, okay? So if you like these book review style episodes, then drop a book in the emoji in the comments. If you prefer more investing videos, hit me with the fire emoji, okay? And if you prefer more tax tips from Ed, then hit us with the thumbs up emoji. We want to make content that's useful to you. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you want more videos like this. Take care.